Hi, welcome back to Ask a Creationist. I'm Todd Wood. I'm president of Core Academy of Science, and I'm a young age creationist. I'm here to answer your questions about creation, evolution, origins, science, faith, the Bible, Genesis, whatever you got. We're interested in hearing from you. Maybe we'll feature one of your questions on a future episode of Ask a Creationist. Let's get to this week's question. This time, we are still dealing with the long series that we're working on right now. Namely, is there evidence against evolution? Or, as I like to think of it, is there evidence that's inconsistent with or poorly explained by evolution? Now, in previous installments of this series, we've looked at all manner of evidences from sort of the back half of Darwin's origin. This time is no different. Now we are going to deal with this question of the fossil record, and particularly what the fossil record evidences or means for evolution. And this one is, I think, one of the more impressive, persuasive, compelling arguments in favor, evidences in favor of evolution. You can strip the fossil record of a lot of interpretation. A lot of other places in the world of evolutionary evidence, you have to sort of imagine a lot of stuff. This is one where you don't necessarily have to imagine much at all. You can sort of look at the fossil record and get a sense that evolution is happening, sort of. So isn't that then objective evidence, the fossil record, that life over time has actually changed, that it is not just that God came and created individual organisms that then diversified or that then became the species that we have today? All right. So here is a fossil record, a schematic showing the fossil record. The lowest layers there, the Precambrian stuff, and then you have what we know as the Phanerozoic, which is divided into these three groups, the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic. So on the bottom of the screen there, that's the oldest stuff, and at the top of the screen, that is the youngest stuff. Everybody okay with that so far? This is the geologic column. This is the geologic record. Now, what do we find in the fossil record that makes people think that evolution must be the answer to explain what happened in the fossil record, or what the fossil record records? Well, first of all, the farther down you go in the fossil record, the less familiar the fossils become. Let me say that again. The farther down you go, the less familiar things become. So for example, let's give a simple example here. Up here in the Cenozoic, at the top of the fossil record, you have fossils of things like mammals. Like this particular creature here is Paleolagus. It is basically a kind of rabbit, sort of. It's recognizable. If you've ever seen a rabbit without its skin on, this looks just like a rabbit. I mean, I can tell just from my days looking at rabbit skulls in my undergraduate classes, that's definitely a rabbit. Looks like a rabbit. And that's the way it is with most Cenozoic fossils. You can find fossil cats and fossil elephants and fossil horses and so forth, and they all look like the kinds of things we have around today. They're not exactly the same, but they're pretty similar. The farther down you go, things start to get weird. So this is a creature called Waiwaxia, and this creature is from the Cambrian, which is the bottom of the Paleozoic. It's basically the last one before you get to the Precambrian, right? Waiwaxia is an animal, but what kind of animal it is, we're not entirely sure. It's very unfamiliar. And that's generally what we find in the Cambrian and the Precambrian rock record. We can see these are, we might be able to put them in large categories like, well, that seems like a jellyfish, or maybe that's an arthropod, like a crustacean or something. But no, it's not like what we have today. Most of the fossils are very, very unfamiliar. If you looked at a display of Cenozoic fossils, you could probably pick out, oh yeah, that looks like a deer and that looks like an elephant and so forth. But if you looked at a display of Cambrian fossils, no, it would be very unfamiliar. So that's one of the things that makes people think that there's that the fossil record is evidencing evolution, that there's a gradual appearance of more modern creatures the farther up the fossil record you go. If you want to find the ones that are most similar to living creatures, it's going to be in the very top layers of the fossil record. All right, well, what other trends do we find in the fossil record that might be evidence of evolution? Well, another really big one is that fossils and types of fossils increase in number as you move up the fossil record. This is a big one because, of course, evolution would predict over time there would be divergence, right? As more and more creatures begin to exploit different environments and find their own little ecological niche, then we would expect over time that there would be more and more types of fossils, what we would call species, or scientists might refer to them as the genera or the families of fossils. You would expect that to increase as you move up the fossil record. And in general, that is what happens. That is what you observe in the fossil record. So these general features of the fossil record really do seem to fit pretty well with what we would expect based on evolution. Like I said, of all the sorts of evidences that I see of evolution, this is the one that I find most compelling. So what about the fossil record? What do we do with the fossil record? And how do I understand the fossil record? Well, you're going to hate me for this, but it's really too complicated for just one short little video. These videos are supposed to be less than 15 minutes. And yeah, I know this is a cop-out, but oh well, it's my video. I can make it the way I want. Yeah, it's too complicated. So I'm going to give you a few ideas about what I think the fossil record might have to do with evolution and what other explanations there might be. But I'm not going to really do anything super definitive here. Mostly because, well, let's get right into it. Number one, fossil record is as much a geological question as a biological one. And it goes beyond just evolution. I'm trying to deal with the evidences for evolution here. Fossil record's a big one. That's true. But it's also a geological one, right? Because I'm not dealing just with questions of creatures and their relationships to one another, how similar they are, and so forth. I'm also dealing with, well, how did they get fossilized? And what is this rock layer that they're found in? What is this telling me about where they lived and how they lived and so forth? And what is the order of the fossil record? What are the layers and how do we arrange them into a meaningful order? And how in the world do we know how old they are in any sort of absolute sense? In certain places, I can find layers, and obviously the ones below have been deposited first, and then, you know, the ones higher up in the rock record have been deposited later. That's pretty much right? But how do I know that that relates to some rock layers that are found in another place? And so you can see my point here. I don't want to belabor this, but the point here is that this becomes a huge question of geology. Paleontology is the convergence of biology and geology, right? And so if we're going to address the fossil record adequately, I can't just give you some cockamamie answers here in a 15-minute or a 10-minute video and expect that to be adequate. So, yeah, it's a geological problem. But I will give you a few thoughts about where I would go with this in the future. So, first of all, I want to know what are the precise patterns of the fossil record and how do they fit, or how well do they fit, the expectations of evolution? And I think this is an open question. This is generally research that's ongoing. People are asking questions about, well, how do we model evolution and the evolutionary relationships of organisms? And then how do we derive information from the fossil record in order to evaluate how well the fossil record fits our evolutionary predictions? So there's a lot of modeling that goes into this, and it's a big, difficult challenge all the way around. But this is definitely a question that I have. There's the general patterns, as we saw in biogeography, and then there are the specific examples where things get really complicated really fast. And that's what I have found sort of a little bit in my dabbling in geology. Second big question that I have then is, what if the fossil record was not a record of a long time period, but of a series of comparatively brief catastrophic events? And that question, of course, brings in geological dating. We're going to have to deal with, the relative dating issues. We're going to have to deal with the radiometric dating issues, and so forth. Gets into some very complicated and very difficult questions right away. So you can see this really deserves a whole series of videos, which is precisely what I want to do. And I'm going to need some geologists to help me with this, so this is going to have to wait for another time. But these are basically my two thoughts. Number one, how well do these evolutionary patterns really fit the actual fossil record? And number two, is the fossil record really giving us a long time series of events, or is it giving us something much different than that? So thanks for watching this episode of Ask a Creationist. If you enjoyed that, please leave a like. And if you really enjoyed it, subscribe and click the bell to receive notifications when we put up a new video. Also visit us online at coresci.org. There you'll find ways to interact with us and submit questions for Ask a Creationist for future episodes. While you're there, you might click on the donate button. It's that time of year again, so we would very much appreciate your financial support at this time. Also, you'll find links there to our social media accounts. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.